Today we'll discuss a past tribe, lesser known in North America, and also Jesus and the Reset. Welcome. Here I want to look at a Seneca man. I should have shared all this days ago when it was fresh on my mind. Really fascinating decor, this metal work, very intricate, leather, and his ear gauges, and even the split on this side. Absolutely fascinating. And look at this hat. Who has a hat like this? And some of you may be asking, who are the Seneca? The Seneca are said to be some of the oldest Native Americans in North America. So before Christopher Columbus supposedly arrived, we have this guy and a whole people like him running around North America. And in the past I made a video showcasing various Native American tribes that looked African, or what we are told is African, and theorized that these may have been some of the original people to this land, and the whole slaves and importing Africans as slaves was a falsity. And it reminds me of a comment that I read recently. Someone was telling me about the Bronx and how people have just always lived there. It's as if inheritors had occupied the rubble clear up until the 60s, generations, until finally they would clean a lot of it up, and real estate value would drive much of this. But here a little look at a Seneca Native American. And the Seneca, or Onondaga, people of the Great Hill, North American Indians of the Iroquoian linguistic group, who live in now what is considered New York State and eastern Ohio. They were the largest of the original 5 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, in which they were represented by 8 chiefs, or perhaps 8 grandfathers, and eventually 6 grandfathers. And they tell us that the men would hunt and the women would gather. And I think that these people were given a lot of different names, and I also think that they were more advanced than a hunter and gathering people. All of this is really advanced. And these people do not seem to resemble any native people today. Now let's look at some other native people. This is something that was shared by Martin on Flat Earth British years ago now, and I've wanted to share it for years, and I guess today's the day, being some old book of the early Americas. Here, I believe, is the name of the book. I believe this would translate to American Parts Map. I'm not sure. And Colombo, Anno 4Cs XC11. And this is one of the strangest books I've ever seen, depicting Native Americans in America pre-Columbus. Somewhere here I had the story. I can't find it. Thought I saved it in one of these tabs. But it was talking about the first explorers that came to the Americas, and these were their accounts and experiences. These people, seeming to be remains of the past civilization, post-reset, in many ways very advanced, seeming to carry knowledge from a past time, and at the same time seeming very primitive. And what nation could we attribute these people to? I don't know. Yet whoever made this book is trying to tell us that these are the original people in America. And I've seen many old depictions of a similar people in South America, and very much resembling the giants. And we're also told these people were much larger in stature than the Europeans. And we'll see some comparisons of that. And these people really reminding me of the Susquehannocks, a people that were wiped out in the Pennsylvania region. Also said to have been a people of a larger stature. They were an advanced people, farmers and builders, and predated all the other Native American tribes. They were absolutely fierce and could not be conquered until the Europeans eventually conquered them, often aligning themselves with other Native American tribes. And I think this may be a depiction, again going through the customs of an advanced time, but yet this is post-reset for these people. And they have been rendered primitive, but yet carrying some sort of custom that is not seen today. Take these hats, for example. These remind me of the simple hats that the Peruvians wear, but this actually seems to be their hair. But it may be a hat, because in some images we see that they're bald. And it seems like a story where there was some sort of cooperation with the European, and then there was a betrayal, and we end up having what seems like a war between the two. And some might say, is any of this true? Is this all just folly? And of course, that's for you to decide. Personally, I don't think so. When we see so much detail, it makes me feel like this is real and has been forgotten. Even though I'd seen these images before, I almost lost them. And here, a depiction of how one would hunt crocodile. You just shove a big stake in its mouth, and then a couple arrows, and a few whacks of the club. And again, very barbaric, but nothing like any of the stories we've ever heard of Native Americans in North America. Worth our consideration, and really seeming like a prospering people, just having figured everything out. Bushels of vegetables and meat, and long flowing golden hair. Here again we can see them working the fields with tools of metal. And here it seems like they are showing their various ways for medical treatment, even having nice little lounge chairs for the patients, and some kind of smoke therapy back here. And here we see some Europeans now, in comparison to these people, and the women all seem sad and distraught, and this man really having an Incan kind of feel. Not sure if these are tattoos, having some kind of metal breastplate. Here we can see some of the leaders. Looks like they're off to battle. And here's someone else important in the center, Holato Utina. And I'd planned on going through this whole book, but I think I've made my point. Some other people in North America that we've been told nothing about. And here, just like the Susquehannocks of Pennsylvania, we see earthworks. Somebody is shaping the water way back pre-Columbus in the star fort fashion. And this is absolutely the base of a star fort. Even in this image, in ruins, but we see brick and stonework that this point is made of. We see trees that have been planted in rows. And again, this is all post-reset. This junky wood has been put up in a makeshift fashion, as well as these homes on the inside. And we see a lot of the artificial forming of land, even in these old depictions. And I would really love to read this book. I wish there was a translated version available, really seeming to start out with Noah's Ark. And being that this book is talking about these people in America, those people we're looking at, we may be told, are the descendants of Noah. But I think I'll leave it there for now. There was more I wanted to show, but I think you get my point. Sometimes I want to talk about something, and I end up changing the subject. I want to talk about Jesus and Tartaria, but it's pretty heavy and pretty uncertain. So I should start off by saying I don't know. I have a better feel for what is not than exactly what is. But sometimes, when we have a whole community researching a topic, it can get a little bit out of hand. Here I'm recording at the coffee shop, and it's very noisy. I say a few words, and then I have to pause and let the traffic go by. Strange how busy even my small town has become. Shouldn't a bunch of people have died off? But nonetheless, when we're dealing with a community researching, I think we have the opportunity to make a lot of advances. Advances that would be not made if one was just researching on his or her own. But also a lot of wild ideas can come out of sharing research. And if one were to just stumble upon some of these wild ideas, may think them to be the sum of the research. And speaking of the lack of mass die-offs, I think the pandemic brought us something good. All of my life, I've listened to religious people talking about the end, and either panicking about it or resigning any concerns with worldly affairs, preparing for the rapture, or the end, or the beginning. And within our community, when the pandemic set in, many channels fell apart and started saying this same thing again. It's the end, get your affairs ready, and again some in despair, preparing for the end. And I told you back in February 2020, I was dating such a girl, and she believed this. And I believed her to be wrong, along with the countless others that had come before her. And it was then, when I had the revelation, that this must be an old story, and I made a video about it, and many of you will remember that. It seemed clear to me that this story, that was planted so firmly in the psyche of our culture, was not some prophecy, but rather a story that had already come to pass. This 1,000 years of peace had already come to pass because we saw the remains of a highly advanced people all throughout the realm. And this was clear. Simply interpreting this story of Revelation, it was clear. Of course, there had been 1,000 years of peace, followed by the metaphorical, and I stressed metaphorical, reign of Satan. And it was clear we were coming out of this amnesia, or this metaphorical era. This could be called the Dark Ages, as far as we're concerned. Just slipping out of our amnesia, this small community. And what did this community do with my theory? Is took out the metaphor part and began calling it the millennial reign of Christ, which I did not. And although I am a man of God, the Father, the highest and most high, and I am also a great prescriber to the teachings of Jesus, in no way did I say and think that this has anything to do with the character we call Jesus. And really, I don't think Revelation has anything to do with Jesus, as it was prophesied long after his death, we are told. And I love, once again, the teachings of Jesus. His teachings could fit into a very, very small 30-page book, and his teachings were once compiled by Thomas Jefferson and published. So again, great teachings, some of the best, and I would love to see a world where people practice the teachings of Jesus and not be such hypocrites. But I don't think that's what this 1,000 years or period is referring to. I don't think Jesus was concerned with building castles and cathedrals and all the works of the ancient world that we see. Not at all. This doesn't fall in line with his teachings at all. Not concerned with worldly affairs. And we don't just have beautiful cathedrals from the old world, but we have shitty brick buildings too. And it makes no sense that all this was constructed by angels, either fallen or elevated. What this 1,000 years, I believe, is referring to, and perhaps I should have stressed it then, is the last reset. And the last reset was the prosperous one. And for 1,000 years, there was prosperity. And as the Native Americans let us know, there have been 4 cataclysms, at least. And they refer to this as the red and blue star Kachina, the flipping of these resets or the plasma charge, like a switch, red and blue, red and blue. And during the red sky, there is prosperity, and there is no winter, and the light is warm, no seasons, and abundance everywhere. And I think this is what the Bible refers to as the period where the lion shall lay with the lamb, even though it says wolf now. A time where there is peace, and perhaps the air is so enriched with chi, or prana, or ether, that the lion or wolf doesn't even have to hunt or eat, and nor would we. And so that's it in a nutshell. I believe Jesus is the reset. It's the metaphor for the reset. And the period, the short period of Satan is the blue sky and the less favorable flipping of the plasma charge. And if this is the case, and 0 now marks not the birth of Christ, now that wouldn't make very much sense to reset a calendar for everyone. But it would if it was the last reset. And that would be simple enough then. We could say, well, the last reset occurred 1,022 years ago. But in actuality, that might be 2 resets ago. And the birth of Christ represented the red sky, or the favorable reset cycle. And from our research, there was another reset 200 years ago, or up to 4. And we are living on the tail end of that cycle. The blue sky, the seasons, and snow, and harsh, glaring light. And if that's the case, this is very positive. This would indicate that the next reset will be the red sky. But again, it would all be so simple, or somewhat, if they had not altered the timeline and clearly added the 1,000 years. But I just really wanted to stress that. I hope I haven't offended anyone. This is just my opinion. So I think that's it. I thank you all for joining me this week. Do have a blessed day. I love you all, and I'll see you next week. This next segment, I was kind of in a mood, but I thought I'd share it just in case it has any value. But I do want to stress we should avoid our desires, or not completely be a slave to them. I don't totally agree with everything I said this day, but I'll share it nonetheless. When you live alone, or if you have the opportunity to be alone, I think you are closer to the source of creation, God, whatever you want to call it. And I can see why mystics and such would go off to a cave. And I'm the type of person who would go off to a cave. Unfortunately, these days there aren't any caves available. Even if there were, you couldn't just live in one. Unless you were rich and could afford to buy a piece of land with a cave. But oftentimes that should be enough, a piece of land. But even with a piece of land, we'll have neighbors, pets, family, friends, and you really do have to be firm, unfortunately, in this life. Turn your cell phone off, or don't answer that call, or just say no. Just say no. And that's okay. No is okay. No doesn't need a big explanation or even a lie. You can honor yourself and how you feel, and not feel like an asshole for doing so. Are you part of our Super Rewards program? No. Would you like to join? And I once saw the movie Yes Man with Jim Carrey, and in this instance, I encourage the absolute opposite. I give you permission to say no. Having said all that, I think we should be selfless most of the time. I forget which part of the Bible says, ignore thyself, for either better mental health or wealth. There just needs to be a balance. And now I'm going to sing. Sur le pont d'Avignon, on y danse, on y danse, danse. On y danse tous en rond. Oh, we dance on the bridge d'Avignon. Oh, we dance in a circle. What a strange little song, child song in French. And I once had a mean teacher in 2nd grade named Mrs. Davignon. And I was just doing a little mud on my sheetrock and singing this song. And I thought, you know what? I'll just look into it real quick and sing you this song. Here I found something. A picture of Le Pont and a little history. The Avignon Bridge in Provence is known around the world today because of the famous children's song. In medieval times, it was also a well-known bridge, but not because of this song. It was known because of the miracle of its construction. First of all, the bridge was renowned as a marvel of construction. 22 arches spanning 915 meters, or 3,000 feet, made quite an impression on the medieval observer. So very interesting that even this author, and apparently even historically, this was seen as a miracle. A young shepherd heard the voice of God telling him to build a bridge across the Rhone. Then, to prove that it was God, he picked up a huge boulder, so heavy that 30 strong men couldn't move it. It was declared a miracle, and the devout started making pilgrimages to see the bridge. Its fame spread far and wide throughout France and beyond. People started singing about this miraculous landmark as far back as the 15th century, when it was referred to in pillow songs. It's a mystery to me why people would go into the newlywed's bedroom and sing about a bridge, or anything else for that matter, but I guess those were different times. So there you go. We are told one of the first versions of the song, using the phrase "Sur le pont d'Avignon," comes from Venice in 1503. Very interesting. And I've been singing this song all my life, and I've never actually seen it. So even here in the narrative, essentially having no explanation, except for a miracle, and really reminding me of the London Bridge in Lake Havasu in a lot of ways. The bridge that was supposedly moved from London to Arizona. And not just a populated part of Arizona, but the middle of nowhere in the desert.